Welcome back, everybody, to the Convo Couch. Pasta Jardula here.
And I'm Fiorella.
Fam, I don't know if you know this. My face is like red. My neck is red. I've been going through like the worst eczema BS things, trying to get it under control. I've been meditating, only going natural stuff. I changed the whole diet. You know what I'm saying? I went keto because everybody says that's a low inflammatory diet. I think I got this, fam, when I went into the United States Navy and they jabbed me up because I don't remember having it as a little kid. But they started giving me everything under the sun over there. They didn't even tell you. You know, in the Navy, you're just a number. You're not a person. You really don't have an opinion. So when I say, "Hey man, when am I getting shot up?" with, like, "Shut up, sailor, get on the ground, pull your pants down, and take it like a man." And then they shoot you up in your ass, and you got to roll on the ground. And they always say it's a penicillin shot, but they want to make sure that you have everything in case you're 20,000 leagues under the sea. Now you can fight off whatever they think you can do. I mean, who knows? But ever since then, you know, and I did move to California, which is totally different climate than it is in Florida and South Florida. And you were down in South Florida. You saw how swampy it is and how humid and disgusting it is. So I don't know if it's my body that just built like, you know, got used to the California weather. And then when I went back home to Florida, it goes, "Hello, what's going on?" But this whole week has been like, I felt like my body is kind of like fighting it, fam. And through the whole recovery process has been pain, you know, it's been like trying to get my skin right. It's been bad. It's been annoying and it's been aggravating. And that's why, you know, I haven't been around this whole week. I went to the RFK meetup thing for 4th of July, and it was so interesting, fam, because I didn't even get to talk about it because it was a bunch of medical freedom people. So it was kind of like separation between medical freedom stuff. And with a lot of the attacks on the refugee camp, I really haven't been pushing RFK as much when it happens. And you see like this Israeli situation going, it's like, yeah, I don't agree with him at all in that position. So I'm not going to promote him today or try to see what's going on. But yeah, fam, that's what's been going on with me. I'm in mass pain, in case you can't tell. That's why I'm squinting.
Yeah. Yeah, he was promoting Israel again the other day, actually. So, yeah, I can't do that. I can't deal with his shit. Like, God, let's not even get into that
Well, I
because
mean, I
it
know
will
right here
just,
in the first subject we dive into today, it's, you know, he's been very vocal about that too as well. You know, like I said, vocal about Elliot Abrams, vocal about these other people. It sucks that he's not there in Israel. But I mean, across the board, whatever the case may be, this situation, I don't give a damn who you are, what candidate you support, or if you don't support any candidate. This is some wrong stuff over here.
ah,
This is like this, careful, fam. This is like history. Like I don't understand, and I think American people are so disconnected from it. Princess Diana had a big thing about mines and cluster bombs, fam. She was so against it because it doesn't go after soldiers. It doesn't hurt anybody. And I can't understand the explanation for this, fam. Um, do you want to say anything before I
so
dive into the article?
yeah,
But wow, holy shit.
yeah. So obviously Biden, I think I was one of the first people to say this because we were covering this, and it looked like he was going to do it, and so by all accounts, he was. I knew he was going to do it, and then he did it. He announced that they were going to send cluster bombs to Ukraine. If you go back a few months ago, when Jen Psaki was the spokeswoman for the Biden administration, she considered cluster bombs a war crime. And they were saying that Russia was using them. And so they said that it constitutes a war crime. Well, that all apparently didn't happen because Joe Biden decided to support Ukraine by sending these cluster bombs. And I have a video that explains exactly why cluster bombs are a problem. And they're basically one bomb that has little bombs in it, or what you would call bomblets, and they break up into tiny pieces. And they stay there years and years and years after they have blown up. And some of the countries that have experienced these cluster bombs are Cambodia, Vietnam, the Southeast Asian countries that dealt with US intervention. And so Brian was on there earlier I don't think I put that video on there. And Brian, obviously, and Vanessa were on the show on Friday, which everybody really liked that. That was a really good show. We discussed pretty much everything. And we did mention the cluster bombs, but he talked about the fact that this is definitely a big thing when it comes to these countries in Southeast Asia that are still feeling the side effects and the consequences of these cluster bombs. So this is why there's a treaty between these countries that have gone after the United States. They're NATO allies. Germany, England, and others have said you shouldn't be doing this. So when NATO says you're doing really bad, what, like, if NATO is telling the United States that they shouldn't be doing this, how awful and psychopathic do you have to be? I mean, this is just, if NATO is the voice of reason, please tell me how awful do you have to be, right? So why don't you go ahead and get into the article and then we'll get into the rest of it. But there is absolutely no excuse to supporting Joe Biden in this. And of course, the same day that Joe Biden decided to send these cluster bombs, AOC decided to endorse him. And so did Bernie Sanders. And we're going to talk about that. But go ahead, fam.
Sorry about that, fam. Is this the video on RT, the one from RT that explains what's going on with the bombs?
Yeah, but if you want to talk about your article first, we can do that.
Let's go right into the video, because if it has a visual, and we can talk about the bomblets. I mean, that word alone, bomblets. And, I reached out to Scott Ritter to see if I can get him on the show. He was busy for today. I want somebody to come on that's going to really explain what these things have done before. Like I said, Princess Diana, and you were talking about Southeast Asia, she led a whole charge against this to get rid of mines, to get rid of cluster bombs, because who they affect when they're left behind. It is a shame. Let's take a look and see what RT has to say about this.
Amid the apparent lack of any significant progress in the counteroffensive, Washington this week decided to equip Kiev cluster bombs, a big story you'll have seen. Now, a Pentagon official is of the view, we heard from him saying that essentially casualties caused by the munitions are ultimately of secondary importance to stopping a Russian victory.
I'm as concerned about the humanitarian circumstance as anybody. But the worst thing for civilians in Ukraine is for Russia to win the war. And so it's important that they don't.
The Biden administration's decision to supply Kiev's regime with cluster munitions is yet another blatant manifestation of the aggressive anti-Russian policy of the United States, which aims to prolong the conflict in Ukraine as long as possible and wage war until the last Ukrainian. By supplying cluster munitions, Washington will in fact be an accomplice in mining the territory and will fully share the responsibility for the deaths caused by the explosions, including those of Russian and Ukrainian children. The transfer of cluster munitions is a gesture of desperation and evidence of powerlessness in the face of the failure of Ukraine's touted counteroffensive.
And something significant surrounding all this, Washington's move provoked a rare split among allies in the normally united stance to the conflict. The Spanish defense minister expressed reservations, along with the German foreign minister and the British prime minister, who we'll hear from in a second. All three countries are signatories to the cluster munition treaty that bans their use.
Spain, based on the firm commitment it has with Ukraine, also has a firm commitment that certain weapons and bombs cannot be delivered under any circumstances. No to cluster bombs, and yes to the legitimate defense of Ukraine, which we understand should not be carried out with cluster bombs.
I have followed the media reports. For us, as a state party, the Oslo Agreement on the Convention on Cluster Munition applies.
The UK is signatory to a convention which prohibits the production or use of cluster munitions and discourages their use.
Well, just to give some background here, hundreds of smaller bomblets from an inner canister. The small bombs are then dispersed over a large attack area. They have a comparatively high so-called flood rate that results in greater numbers of casualties, even years after they've been launched. Former senior security policy analyst in the office of the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Michael Maloof, says that countries opposed to Washington's decision, well, they should stand fast, but isn't convinced they will.
I think that it's remarkable that the NATO countries, who some 2/3 of the NATO countries actually are signatories to that convention to prevent cluster bombs. And it's incredible that they'll still go along with the United States in allowing that to happen. They've got to stand firm now and make a stand. They haven't done that up until now. And I think that they're going to have to. And I'm hoping that this could be the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back, in which they say, okay, that's enough. And that they're going to resist this. As long as they follow the United States in this, look where the United States has taken them to date. And it's nothing more than an escalation of this conflict. So let's see if they stand up now to the United States and resist this decision. They can turn it around. They can say to the put pressure on the United States that they're not going to do it. But they're weak. All these countries are weak. Unless they start showing these countries have got to say enough and mean it and do something about it and make presentations to the White House to say that this is unacceptable.
Right. So you can see why these cluster bombs are a problem. And I mean, you have England, Spain, and Germany all saying, no, we said no to these things. I mean, I don't know what that tells you, Fab, but it tells you where the United States has lost their mind in terms of the consequences. And by the way, they say they care about Ukrainians. This is literally going to blow up Ukrainians, especially children, kind of like the pedal mines that Eva Bartlett has been covering in Donbass. These things can explode way after the fact. And they have been found to maim so many people. So it's going to maim a lot of people. It's going to create people who lose limbs, who lose their lives because of this. And what exactly does this do for Ukraine in the conflict as a whole? It absolutely does nothing, because it's not going to change anything whatsoever.
So there is and it's kind of interesting. There is a article out, and Rishi, we were just talking about, the Brits. Rishi's even saying that, we shouldn't use these things. But
the UK is signatory to a convention which prohibits the production.
That's the one we just saw.
Munitions and discourages their use. We will continue to do our part to support Ukraine against Russia's illegal and unprovoked invasion. We've done that by providing heavy battle tanks and most recently long-range weapons, and hopefully all countries can continue to support Ukraine. Russia's act of barbarism is causing untold suffering to millions of people. It's right that we collectively stand up to it, and I'll be heading off to the NATO summit next week in Vilnius, where we will be discussing exactly this with our allies, how we can strengthen our support for Ukraine.
The thing that just drives me crazy, it's just no matter what, it's kind of like, yeah, it's bad, but we're going to do it anyways. And I hope these other countries can still participate. Fam, from what you've been hearing, your talk around anywhere in your neck of the woods, is there some type of legitimate excuse for saying, okay, these are going to be essential for Ukraine to win the war or help them win the war, or help them with their advance because it does X, Y, and Z. And there is this talk that Russia's been using cluster bombs the whole time. I haven't heard about that until, of course, right now when Biden wants to send the cluster bombs. But do you see any legitimacy in what they're saying whatsoever about how it could help them win the war, or we're doing it because they're doing it?
No, it's not going to help them win the war at all, because Ukraine has been losing thousands of men. They've been losing, their counteroffensive massively failed. And pretty much everybody, including the military in the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, are saying that they are not where they would like to be. So these cluster bombs are only made to pretty much maim and destroy people. They're literally a target for civilians. They're not even a military type of ammunition. That's why they're banned. So it's just, you're not really going after the military by using these cluster bombs. You're going after civilians, and that includes your own civilians. Yeah. Because if you're talking about a conflict zone, you're going to have Ukrainians there as well. And again, this is a point where you're going to have people who have nothing to do with anything step on one of these years later and be blown off because of it. That's the whole point, is these things last, people are still dealing with it decades and decades after the wars and of US interference in countries like Laos and Vietnam and Cambodia. So they know for a fact that this is a thing. This is why they've been speaking out against it. And they have said this is absolutely unacceptable. And even NATO, who have zero issue being terrorists as an organization, and have zero issue talking about Russia's unjustified illegal war against Ukrainians and blah blah blah, and have zero issue supporting Nazis in Ukraine, have an issue with these cluster bombs. So there is no excuse, honestly, to be using them, and it just seems to me that this is more of a move to sort of puff your chest rather than anything else. And the fact that Joe Biden is supporting this, and he's being supported by all these quote unquote progressives, literally in spite of this, really just goes to show you how far they're willing to go to create this narrative.
Yeah, it almost seems like it's a F around and find out. Like, you want to resist us, at the end, we'll get as dirty as we can. We're going to send cluster bombs at the end. You shouldn't have opposed us in the first place, because nothing's off the table for us. We've danced and kind of talked about nuclear weapons. I mean, this just shows you how far the military-industrial complex is out of control, completely out of control. And we're going to talk about some more stuff today. Very interesting stuff, fam. I found out over the weekend. I didn't even know what was going on in April, where Lavrov was meeting with Biden's and Blinken's bosses. We'll talk about that later. But I do have a video right here from Nico kind of chiming in from Khanna, fam. Your favorite progressive, the head of the squad, supposedly that he was going to be the one they were going to troll out there and run him out for president. We got a quick minute, 27 seconds from Nico over at Hotspot. Take a listen, guys. Khanna throwing his 2 cents into the cluster bomb argument.
After the U.S. basically begged Ukraine to commit war crimes, after they sent them a bunch of cluster bombs, Khanna decided to chime in and say, it's really our fault because we don't get to send them enough conventional artillery. Therefore, we have to send them artillery that will no doubt lead to thousands of civilian casualties. Maybe Ro is right, everybody. Maybe we just haven't sent Ukraine enough weapons, and we're being too hard on Khanna making that claim. Like, they basically are fighting with sticks and stones, hoping that they can break a couple of bones. Like, there is no research that I have found that shows that we are sending an adequate amount of weapons to Ukraine. Oh, that was just a super long list of conventional weapons that we've already sent to Ukraine. In fact, the longest list out of all the countries who have sent weapons to Ukraine already, in case you missed the sarcasm. But he didn't stop there. He somehow used this tweet as an opportunity to fearmonger about China having too much access to too much steel, which in truth is the fault of the US, but that's neither here nor there. When you couple Rose's tweets with Lindsey Graham's recent tweet about working with Democrats and Republicans to grant admission to Ukraine to join NATO, it makes you think there's a bipartisan effort to start World War III, bro.
Fam, they're always going to find a way, whether it be on the left or the right, fam. It doesn't make a difference. They're always going to bring it back to you-know-who.
China.
Always. No matter what, they're going to bring it back to China. Really quickly, just so we have it, fam, I'm just going to really blitz through this really quick because it's the article. You know, we love our boy Dave DeCamp over there at antiwar.com. Biden defends decision to send cluster bombs to Ukraine. Last year, the White House said the use of cluster munitions was a potential war crime, except for when we do it, fam. President Biden on Friday said, and I'm riding with Biden, defended his decision to arm Ukraine with cluster bombs, which are banned by over 100 nations because of their exceptionally harmful, because they are exceptionally harmful to citizens. The Pentagon announced Friday that the U.S. was sending cluster munitions to Ukraine as part of an $800 million weapons package. How many of these 800 million, billions, whatever packages we have? Kiev will receive dual-purpose improved conventional munitions, DPI, CMs, small bomblets, when they're getting all cute calling them bomblets, packaged into 155 millimeter artillery shells designed to spread munitions. On February 28th, 2022, the White House press secretary Jen Psaki, and this is what you mentioned, fam, who now has her own TV show on MSNBC once a week on Saturdays, if you haven't seen it, or it might be on Sundays, told reporters that Russia's use of cluster munitions in Ukraine would potentially be a war crime. But now the Biden administration has changed its tune on the widely banned munitions. Speaking to CNN's Fareed Zakaria on Friday, President Biden said he needed to send cluster bombs because Ukraine and the U.S. are running out of ammunition. Oh, Jesus Christ. This is a war relating to munitions, and they're running out of the ammunition, and we're low on it, he said. And so what I finally did is I took recommendations of the Defense Department to, not permanently, but to allow for the transition period while we get more 155 weapons, these shells for the Ukrainians. While Biden frames the provision of the cluster bombs as temporary, Colin Kahl, Undersecretary of the Defense for Policy, said the U.S. will arm Ukraine with hundreds of thousands of munitions. Cluster bombs are especially hazardous to civilians because many of the bomblets don't explode on impact, meaning people would find them years later. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. dropped millions of cluster bomblets on Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, and each country is still dealing with them to this day. Kahl insisted that the cluster munitions the U.S. will send to the Ukraine were tested and will have a dud rate, listen to this, fam, I love this part, of 2.35%. But the New York Times reported that the rate will be closer to 14% due to the factors on the battlefield not taken into account during the Pentagon test. The Times report said each 155 millimeter artillery shell will be packed with 72 bomblets, a dud rate of 14%. Each shell will leave behind about 10 unexploded bombs, a major hazard for civilians if they are not cleaned up. Kahl said the U.S. has received assurances that Ukraine's won't cluster munitions in civilian populated urban environments. That's going to be kind of interesting since they've only been firing in civilian environments. But cluster munitions are incredibly hazardous to people living in rural areas, as they are often found by farmers or children playing in forests. Ukraine has a history of using cluster bombs against civilian populated areas. In 2014, Human Rights Watch reported that the Kiev government was using cluster munitions in populated areas of Donetsk City. Ukraine has also used cluster bombs in populated areas during the current conflict with Russia. A day before the Pentagon announced it was arming Ukraine with cluster bombs, HRW issued a report, this is Human Rights Watch, that said the Ukrainian forces killed at least 8 civilians with cluster bombs in the eastern city of Izium in 2022. Human Rights Watch said Russian forces have also killed many civilians with cluster bombs, and the Biden administration officials have defended their decisions by pointing to the Russians' use of controversial munitions. The U.S., Russia, and Ukraine are not signatories to the treaty that bans the munitions known as the Convention on Cluster Munitions. Fam, I know you are, but what am I? They're using them, so we're using them. That's the excuse they're going to use. I don't know. Final thoughts on this. This is kind of messed up. I don't even know what to say anymore. It's so messed up.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't aware of Russia using them, but I will say that the thing that disturbed me the most was what's his name, Colin Kahl's statement that it's more important to stop a Russian victory than to save civilians, and he flat out said that, and that is extremely disturbing. Because if you're talking about Ukrainians and saving them, this is going to do the opposite. So, and I don't think they care, because as we found out, the foreign mercenaries are the ones that are being sent to fight the strong positions and strongholds of the Russian military, and they don't really care about saving them. They're not really sending the Ukrainians there. So there's this perspective that, this war is just using these people as cannon fodder. And so they don't really care that they are going to lose people. because again, the whole point is to the last Ukrainian, right? So yeah, and on this section too, I wanted to address the AOC support of Joe Biden. She backed Biden for re-election, and she did this on the day, of course, where these cluster munitions were approved. And this is the person who a few years ago ran as a progressive to, knock down the establishment, to challenge the status quo. She was supposed to be somebody that was going to follow in the footsteps of Bernie Sanders. And it turns out she's more of a warmonger than Bernie Sanders himself, who has also endorsed Joe Biden, in spite of the fact that there are other candidates, one of them being Cornel West, who was a part of his campaign. In spite of the fact there are candidates that are speaking against nuclear war, he has decided to endorse Joe Biden, the guy who pretty much he fought with for decades on the floor of Congress. So it is really strange to see, but not surprising that AOC has turned out to be worse. And she's basically Nancy Pelosi Jr. at this point, supporting the same policies. And, the Democrats are going to rave about how happy they are that their party is so united. But their party is so united in war. The party is so united that it makes the Republicans look less war hungry in many ways, at least when it comes to Ukraine and Russia. So she is backing Joe Biden, and she went on none other than Pod Save America, the most liberal podcast you can go on, and said she was going to support Biden. And she said this. She said, I believe, given that field, that yes, she's going to support him. And she said, I think he's done quite well, given the limitations that we have. I do think there are ebbs and flows, as there are in any presidency. So I mean, this is what we're used to with the Democrats, right? A lot of what is it? Word salad. Have you seen Kamala Harris's latest comments? I mean, she says a whole lot of nothing, right? And this is what AOC has turned into, and none of her little sycophants can make any excuses now. How can you excuse this? She has the opportunity to endorse other people or not endorse anybody at all. And she's choosing to endorse Joe Biden at a time when he's pushing for more war with Russia, for more weapons for Ukraine. There is absolutely no excuse at this point. And the only reason I'm mentioning it is because we're talking about these cluster bombs. So, I mean, this is a whole part of this thing. And there's a video where you can see and really get nauseous watching her, how she pretty much her transformation is complete. Or maybe this is who she always was, which is where I'm leaning as well.
While you mentioned AOC, I also want to mention this too as well. In New York, she was questioned the other day, and watch the handlers, how they try to protect her. She was asked the other day, in New York, you had all these people during the mandates that lost their job, close to 50,000, workers that lost their job. And ever since they dropped the mandates, a lot of these workers been looking to go back to work to get their jobs back, but they still haven't been able to do it. Well, let's hear what AOC has to say about them with her word salad about should those people who were mandated, my body, my choice, remember that? They were mandated. Now the mandates have been dropped. They still haven't been able to return to work. Let's listen.
Yeah, local reporter. You just heard me just one question.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you. How's it going?
So I want to ask you this question because you're such a strong supporter of labor rights, civil rights, bodily autonomy. How do these issues come together with the issue of New Yorkers who lost their jobs during the pandemic due to mandates?
Due to the mandates.
And there are still a lot of those people who have not been reinstated, who want to be reinstated. What is your position on that? Would you support reinstating those New York City workers and state workers who lost employment under the mandates and want to go back to work?
Yeah, well, I believe the mayor had lifted many of those mandates towards the end of some of these shutdowns. But I think a lot of it, frankly, depends on the environment. In healthcare environments that are very sensitive, educational environments, I think these are things that need to kind of be looked at, and they tend to have different healthcare requirements per sector.
So those workers,
that was one question, my dear. I'm so sorry.
Not reinstated.
I'm so sorry. That was the one.
And
I think
this
it depends on the
includes sanitation
sector.
workers.
I'm so sorry.
City workers.
We did the one. I'm so sorry.
I think it depends on the sector that first. Thank
so
you.
Sanitation workers. Yes. No.
Sorry.
So, fam, who is she working for? Like, not even New Yorkers. She can really just, not even for New Yorkers, workers that she can stand up and go, hey, man, there were sanitation workers who didn't want to get the jab. They're still not out, been able to come back to work. We've ended the mandates. Let them go back to work. You're talking about, fam, in these positions in New York, and I was just in New York, and I have a lot of family members who are in the unions and do construction workers. This is their livelihood. They've been doing it for so long. People in the medical field, nurses for doing it for so long, just looking to go back to work would get their job because they were unjustly told they had to take a medical procedure that they didn't want to take. And she's still kind of like, I don't know about if you heard that there, fam, but it seemed like she was kind of manufacturing consent for the mandates of sorts. Oh, it was just
of course she was.
Conditions and fam. And,
would you expect anything different from her? I mean, this is who she is. And who is she working for? She's definitely not working for the people of New York. She's definitely has handlers, and she's definitely working for the establishment. It's been very clear for a long time. So, it was brave of this person to ask her that question, good of this person to ask her that question, but she wasn't going to answer any different. That's who she is. And she was always supportive of not just the lockdowns, but the mandates themselves, and supportive of dividing people based on their vaccination status. And her whole contingent of her little supporters were also the same. These like vaccine fascists that wanted to look at people differently because they decided not to get a vaccine that we have now found out had a lot of issues. And so there's a lot that in spite of the fact that the CDC said they were safe and effective, there's a lot to look at. There's a lot of things that we talked about a long time ago, from the beginning of this whole thing in 2020, before it was safe to talk about, before all of this stuff. And now we've come full circle where, when you interviewed Cornel West, even he admitted he stopped getting the vaccine.
Yeah.
Right. So clearly, if somebody who believes in it suddenly said, okay, no more. And I have friends who are nurses themselves who refuse to take any more. This is in the United States. This is a reality. This is not made up. And so that sentiment has shifted, and she's really dumb because people think New York could never go red. I disagree. I think New York could definitely go red. But obviously you'd have to have a fair election system. I think there are a lot more people who are not happy with people like AOC, I think, than they want you to think. And if you go throughout the United States, you will find that out very quickly. So, that's something. I'm glad you brought that up, because this just really showcases her 100%. And we haven't done a show like this where we show a lot of clips about AOC, because my mind has been on foreign policy, and even talking about this is sort of like weird to me now. But I think it does signify how the United States is literally in free fall right now. Your progressives are war criminals, are more warmongers than the Republicans. Everything is upside down. You don't have a fair election system. You can't rely on these people. So all you have to do really is continue to expose, but also look at it from a different perspective here. Because when it comes to foreign policy, this is where the progressives never cared. But this is why you need to care about foreign policy, because then you end up with somebody like this, like AOC.
I got to say this much is that, I was on Due Dissidence about a week and a half ago, fam, and I went on there to talk a little bit about what the whole pandemic was about. In Due Dissidence, they're at an area, they're lefties, and they're starting to look down that rabbit hole and start to kind of go down in a little bit, I talked about The Real Anthony Fauci, the book, not so much because I'm trying to, talk about RFK, but 80% of that book, since people like me and you followed it in real time, understood what was going on when that book came out. There were certain things that, he might have tied together as far as his position, RFK, when it comes to going after 3-letter agencies. But from us following this thing the whole time, to come full circle, they still have a lot of things in play, implemented in place behind the scenes as far as what they can do, their power, the way the government has gained more power, more spying power. They're looking for more reasons to give mandates now. They're talking about the WHO. They're still going through with the whole treaty. There's, people like Peter Hotez going to different countries talking about a global vaccine program. So there's a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes that, we've kind of drifted away from. Like you said, it feels a little funny talking about it. I haven't even talked that much about it. But before I went on Due Dissidence, I went back and looked at some of our videos. And holy shit, fam, we were, as leftists, we were probably out in front better than anybody. I think Kim Iverson was the only one who was kind of out there with us in some of the work we did. But now a lot of this information we know it to be true. The data is there. We have to start kind of circling the wagons and looking about it again. From what I witnessed in that whole 4th of July event, the medical freedom movement is kind of sticking their heads out. It's not just the Children's Health Defense. There's all these other groups, ex-nurses, ex-medical workers that are like, okay, they got through this again. They're trying to slime away without any recourse, without any punishment. And even furthermore, they're trying to make sure that the infrastructure is in place when it comes to track and trace using this pandemic, if not the next pandemic they're talking about. So it's something we're going to have to revisit a little bit, fam, as it comes around, because I think you're going to have more people talking about it. And you're going to hear more people repeating that same thing, safe and effective. It seemed to me that AOC was okay, despite any information whatsoever coming out, that she's okay that mandates were there and people lost their jobs. Because she's going to say it was about public health as she gets more pushed.
Of course, that's the excuse.
Say that. Yeah. I have your favorite, Jen Psaki. Fam, don't tell me you don't miss. Tell me you don't miss Psaki.
She could have come up with a better name than Inside. Who wants to be inside with Jen Psaki? Jesus. All right, we can play the video.
I'm just gonna play.
She made it too easy. She made it too easy.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has made her mark in Washington since being sworn into office in January of 2019. At that time, she was both the youngest woman and the youngest Latina to ever serve in Congress. In her years on the Hill, she's become a progressive voice people look to for guidance and reaction when things unfold, both in the Capitol and across the country. I got to chat with her recently about how she's made accountability a key part of her mission as an elected official. Here's a part of that conversation. So you're in the minority in Congress for the first time since you were elected. It seems like you're kind of having fun being a bit of an agitator. Are you enjoying that role?
I think holding those in power accountable is a fundamental part of...
Sorry, fam, really quick. Could I say something about that one sentence there? Ah! So,
I was just going to say, she took it out straight of the progressive phrase book there. Let's hold them account. I don't even like hearing that anymore. I don't. You said it the other day. No, you said it. We got to hold people account. I don't even like hearing it anymore. I think it's a bunch of bullshit. You're not holding anybody. How are you holding them accountable by doing exactly what they want you to do? And she's like, you're this and that. No, she's not. She's literally done everything that they've wanted her to do at pretty much every turn. So it's laughable to see this. And look at how she's interviewing her. This is not an interview where you're being critical of somebody in a position of power. And of course it wouldn't be, because Jen Psaki herself is somebody that was hired by the State Department to do PR. And here she is on her own show on MSNBC doing PR. And she's not even really good either. Okay. And number one. And number two, she's having this girl time with AOC without asking her any hard questions, just literally fawning over how great she is and how she's Latina and the youngest woman and the first Latina. It's just literally the recipe of what they do and how they target these progressive groups And they're just complete and total idiots now for following any of this. I mean, she's having a love fest with Jen Psaki. What more do you need to know? That she's
they
literally
love, fam.
not working for you.
Remember Ryan? I think I can't remember Ryan's last name, but the Democrat when he would always talk about this guy is the first, Muslim to hold this position. He's the second gay man to ever. They love throwing out those little accolades out there as if they mean something. He's the youngest woman of all time, the first Afro-Latino, whatever. All that shit, it doesn't make a difference anymore. Even I don't pay attention to it. I'm like, what are your politics? What are you going to do? And they constantly shield themselves from any tough media. You saw that one lady getting the one question, and it was like, how did they ask? Oh, that's your one question. Yeah, idiot, but she didn't even answer the question yet. I can't push her to answer the question. Maybe because and blah, blah, blah. Let's listen to the rest of this. Look at the hand movements one more time. We got to hear her say, I love holding power accountable one last time.
Are you enjoying that role? I think holding those in power accountable is a fundamental part of our role. And it's a part of a role that I draw on from my history in advocacy and organizing and activism, but it's also one where we can propose solutions while we're also holding people accountable for the decisions that they're making. And so, yeah, I think it's been an important role for us to play.
So you're also a pretty politically astute observer. There is a presidential race that's happening right now. Donald Trump, people think, some say, is the easiest person for Joe Biden to run against. What do you think about that?
Well,
the easiest potential Republican nominee, I should say.
I think there's something to be said about that. The dynamics of these races change from day to day. I think that Governor DeSantis has made some very large critical errors. And I think he's weaker than...
What are his biggest errors, do you think, as you've watched?
Well, you can't out-Trump Trump, right? And that's what he's really been trying to do. His attacks on teachers, on schools, on LGBT Americans, I think go way too far in the state of Florida. And I think that they are a profound political miscalculation and an overcompensation. He may be trying
Sam, can we stop it? This is
is
almost done. Okay, so first of all, the only thing she got right is that DeSantis is going further to the right than Trump, but she mentions the LGBTQ stuff, but she doesn't mention is foreign policy and how DeSantis makes Trump look like a waffle compared to his neocon interventionist foreign policies that he would have all over the world, especially with China and Latin America. But she doesn't mention that because she's going to support very similar policies like that anyway. So she can't mention that, but she'll mention the LGBT and all the other stuff because she knows who she's talking to. That's the only valid point she made, that DeSantis is probably a candidate that Joe Biden could more easily be. I think Donald Trump is definitely going to be harder for Joe Biden. But other than that, if she says, I holding people accountable one more time, like how many times does she have to say it?
That's part of their literature. Remember when she was attacked about like the whole Palestinian thing in the Iron Dome? And then what did she do? She just pivoted to like, well, listen, I hear you. And if we're going to talk about it, then we need to be about it. Lady, we just said that you voted for the Iron Dome and we're talking about you. And yeah, I agree. We need to be about it. And then just, you know what I'm saying? She does that shit when it came to the what was it? The whole thing with the COVID when it came to the housing. Remember, like they didn't fucking figure out how to how to complete this, just a moratorium. And they're out there, yeah, we're doing it. You know what I'm saying? That's it. They do exactly what Donald Trump does. Just brag about anything good. Just make yourselves look good. Just get people into the tribal politics of them versus us. And that's what they're trying to do desperately here. That's what AOC is all about right now. Keeping people inside that establishment Democratic bubble, that culture war bullshit bubble. You know what I'm saying? You're right. She did mention, DeSantis about, the way he is, when it comes to the culture wars, what he's doing with Disney, what he's doing with teachers. And she won't mention those foreign policy decisions because she'll probably be on the same page with him. on the foreign policy.
Yeah.
At least it does when it comes to the whole Ukraine situation, the way he got off the bus, then got back on the bus. It was ridiculous. But that's the same thing she did in New York before, too, as well, when it came to Cuomo. She didn't want to talk about the whole situation when it came to the nursing homes where Cuomo forced people to go back into these nursing homes, essentially killing them, putting them in a situation where we had a lone city councilman, I forgot his name, I think it's City Councilman Kim, it was an Asian dude, and he was pretty much bringing attention to light. Where was AOC? Nowhere to be found on that. Silent. As soon as Cuomo got accused of playing grab ass, then she was out front. Oh my God, with the rest of the progressives, and then he was fired. So he doesn't get fired for murder. He gets fired for bad sexual behavior. You know what I'm saying? It's like she'll always be on top of the culture wars. That's where she exists. That's where her base is. She's got nowhere else to go. She's not been able to move outside that. And unfortunately, more people in the United States, unfortunately for her, more people in the United States are like, okay, we get what you're doing with the culture war bullshit now. This is a divisive tactic, and you're using it so you don't have to answer questions about Ukraine. You don't have to answer questions about arming the Iron Dome. You don't have to answer any of those questions, whatsoever. You just have to move people over here. And that's what she's attempting to do. And that's all she can do, because that's all she's got.
Yeah.
Can we be done with that? I don't want to play any more of that video.
Yeah. No, we're
Thank
done.
God. Who's this, fam?
So can you go back so I can read the tweet?
Oh, you want me to tweet? My bad.
This is a head of the U.S. State Department Press Service, Matthew Miller, and he accidentally said that this war has been a strategic failure for Ukraine, and he met Russia. So he Joe Biden this thing, okay? But yeah, we can just hear it just because it's fun, but also because, cluster bombs or not, Ukraine is not in a good position right now.
A few things. So I will say, with respect to your first question, we believe the war has been a strategic failure for Ukraine. The secretary spoke to this in a speech he gave in Helsinki last month, I believe it was. What's that? So, I'm sorry, a strategic failure for Ukraine. Thank you for the correction. Which is, I need more than one correction today. A strategic. This is the first time at the podium for a week. I'm apparently a little rusty. A few things. So I will say, with respect
a Freudian
to
slip. He was being honest, I mean, it's a Freudian slip, fam. Whatever you want to call it, slip, but it was a slip. That was comedic relief.
Man. Anyways, let me just do some quick thank yous really quickly to people like Gene Whitworth, who are hanging out at the Rockfin premium chat over there. Tits McGee is over there, fam. Gregory Walker, what's going on? Maria Rinaldi, there's 26 people who are premium subscribers over on the Rockfin, ROKFIN. Go over there and sign up for us. Rumble has over 80 people. It's really cool. Listen, guys, we're getting shadow banned and demonetized across the board. And we have close to 200 people hanging out on YouTube, which is cool. Guys, hit the like button, hit the share buttons down below. All the ways you can help are listed in the description, so you can help us out in any way, shape, or form. Fam, I'm going to bring this up really quickly. I'm going to try to go to archive.org because it is not giving me what I need to go pull up the thing, and it's now all of a sudden playing stupid with me. So, fam, we've talked about the Council of Foreign Relations before on the show. When it comes to Ukraine, one of the most notable Council of Foreign Relations blunder or whatnot. All right, let's see. It's not letting me do it. I'm just going to go over as much as I can over here and see if I can use it. One of the biggest blunders in the Council of Foreign Relationship was Joe Biden talking about firing the head of Burisma and stuff, because he's going to be investigating people, and he didn't want his son to get in trouble. But Council of Foreign Relationships is pretty much the NGO of sorts, the think tank that makes all your decisions. Like, they pretty much, since World War II, the Council of Foreign Relations has kind of pointed out many things where they're going. They pretty much control foreign policy. Richard Haas is the Klaus Schwab of the Council of Foreign Relations, and I can't find another article. I got to find it here, but this one's blurred out. You can see Haas confirms this meeting with Lavrov he had in April, and a report of discussions has triggered controversy over the contacts. So what's going on, fam, is pretty much is that the foreign apparatus of the West, the Council of Foreign Relations, is now going and dealing directly with Russia. They're going to Lavrov. They're not even getting Blinken and Biden involved. And a lot of these talks have been talking about how do we find an off-ramp? How do we get the United States out of this war? Because just like it was said, it's been a disaster. So they want to find an off-ramp where they can amicably move on because the embarrassment they had. And like I've said before, and we've seen this, when USAID and Samantha Power, she's gone in with Zelensky. Zelensky's opened the door for BlackRock. They want to get things going eventually over there in Ukraine. They need to end this war. They need an off-ramp. They need to get out of this, and then America can go mess around in Taiwan all they want. But if they want to turn the Ukraine into the fourth industrial revolution testing grounds, from what I already understand, they have 15 cities they already have in place in England in certain places right now. They want to really pump that in to Ukraine. They got to end this war sooner or later. Monsanto's already there, right? Did you know that Putin made a law? The Russian Federation made a law that pretty much criminalized anybody using genetically modified seeds and soils and shit food, right? Like, so I've been phrasing this question here, and I got a question for you right now because it's interesting because where you used to be, and I can't wait to talk to my friends at RBN when we do talk about this. What's more important, that we have Medicare for all on the table, or we get rid of Monsanto in America and start growing healthy food again? What are your thoughts?
I would say that's very difficult, but I think with Medicare for all, you're going to have a lot of bureaucracy get in the way. It's not going to be as easy as people think to resolve this, just mainly because of how far gone the healthcare system is in terms of it's just a business. So I don't think that would be replaced immediately. I think if you do ban genetically modified foods, people would be a lot healthier in the United States right away. You really see a difference in how people live here and how they look and stuff. I mean, people here are not overweight at all. You rarely see people be overweight. And the thing is, it's also the walking. That's another part of it for sure, at least in Moscow. But it's also the food. It tastes different. I will say that the food in the United States, they put stuff in it to make it addictive. They put stuff in it to make it taste better. The portions are at least twice as large. And it's very, I think that you can't just, at the stage the United States is in, you can't just say, have Medicare for all, and that solves the problem. There's going to be there would have to be a complete revamping of the entire system as a whole for it to have an effective healthcare system, because you even see countries like England and Canada run into problems in spite of having healthcare. There's a lot of issues that happen. And so for me, just living here and seeing the different problems with different healthcare systems, it's not just about having healthcare for all. Like, it's about finding a system that works for everybody and that is free for people, but that's not going to rid you of the problems that other nationally public healthcare has. It is going to get rid of the middlemen, though. It's going to get rid of the insurance. That's the thing. Like, and in the United States, people don't want to get rid of the insurance providers. So that's a whole other problem, because people want that sort of choice. And so obviously I don't believe in that, because I don't think it's a choice. I think it's business coming in and trying to manipulate things. But if that's what Americans want, it's just never going to happen, because you're going to have the insurance companies come in there and still have a hold on it. So I think it would just be easier to focus on the fastest change would come from banning something like GMOs. But I don't think you're going to get any of that in the United States, because the United States is completely embedded in those corporations.
I think we have to get the mindset, though, fam. I think what we're talking about is getting the mindset of the people in the right spot. You know what I'm saying? Because I know a lot of people are still hanging on to Medicare for all. And I said, well, what does that look like? What bill are we talking about? Are we talking about Pramila Jayapal's bill? Because that's a handout to the insurance companies. It's a handout to Big Pharma, and I'm not for that. So for me, it would think like, listen, if we just kicked out like what Putin did, it's against the law to grow GMO foods. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you're fixing the front end of the healthcare system that needs to be addressed as opposed to the back end. When I say back end, I'm meaning we have a healthcare system that is built upon sick care. When you get sick, how do they get you better? You take a pill, you take a cream, you take a shot, rather than having healthy choices, healthy foods. Russia, they also have smaller portions I see in their food. You talked about this as well. The portions are smaller. People walk and they get exercise. Somebody's been playing that one video of like, it's a concert of a bunch of American people, you know, and they're out in the summer and they're all big and they're fat and they're having a good time. And it's like, you know, they're, you know, as opposed to a bunch of Russians that young people were dancing, looking all healthy and just so much better. I mean, we need to really fix the front end. This is something that Dr. Ryan Cole had talked about with me, you know, and that was following COVID in real time with Dr. Cole, who was one of the best. And he was like, the whole system itself has got to go. It's a sick care system. We need to change.
That's what I'm saying. It has to be the whole system, though, because you can't just say healthy food, because healthy food is expensive and only certain people have access to that healthy food.
You have to change
a lot
that.
of the times, or spend. They have to spend time consuming. And meanwhile, people are still sick, and people are still sick because of the unhealthy food. Like, so it's like they're sick anyway. You have to deal with sick people who are already sick. And so it has to be that too. And I don't think we're going to get people to agree that it's just going to be, you know, eating healthy only, because some people now have, because of the system you've lived in, have some diseases like diabetes, they have this or that. And then so now it just becomes a thing that it's like a snowball effect. It gets worse and worse and worse, and you start picking up more shit. And by the time it gets there, it's just too big you have to get rid of the whole thing.
I don't want anybody going broke too from their insurance bills. I think that's awful. Fam, I did find a New York Post over here that might be a little bit better really quick. I think this is just so intriguing. I mean, this is when you start talking about former U.S. officials meet privately with Russia for Ukraine peace talks. So it was Richard Haas of the Council of Foreign Relations, former U.S. officials who don't even work anymore. You can see they met with Lavrov in New York. 3 former U.S. national security officials, met privately with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in New York earlier this year, hoping to lay groundwork for the possible negotiations to end Moscow's war in Ukraine. The April talk, which was intended to be kept confidential, but was reported by NBC News Thursday, revolved around potential off-ramps for the conflict. Topics reportedly included the fate of the Russian-held Ukrainian territory that Kiev may not be able to liberate in its current counteroffensive, you think. The officials who spoke with Lavrov with the Biden administration's knowledge, but not at its direction. So in other words, they told them, but Biden's administration had nothing to say to bring to the table. It was all dealing with the Council of Foreign Relations. Like I said, Biden's bosses held the meeting to keep communications open with the Kremlin and search for opportunities for future compromise that could be used in negotiations, according to NBC, which cited 4 former and 2 current U.S. officials in its report. The discussion, which lasted for several hours, occurred while Lavrov was in the U.S. for a meeting of the United Nations Council. And you can see there he is, fam. Your man, Mr. Lavrov.
So I have a couple things here if you want to continue. But I have a couple things to say. Yeah, why don't you continue if there's anything else you want to say?
No, that was pretty much the most of it right there. It said White House spokesman Andrew Bates told reporters on board Air Force One Thursday that he was not going to speak for any private citizens who are not members of the administration, and added, "Our focus is on continuing to help Ukraine succeed on the battlefield so they can negotiate from a position of maximum strength on their terms and no one else's." So that was it.
Yeah. So I don't know how much stock I would put in that meeting, because I know you probably have the conspiracy, whatever, like everybody's saying, oh, this proves that Russia is really opposed or having secret meetings. Lavrov's job is to be a diplomat. So he is going to go out there and literally have meetings with anybody. And one of the things Russia has talked about ad nauseum is they want to negotiate. They've been wanting to negotiate for a long time. The problem is the United States and NATO keep sending ammunitions to Ukraine. So once they've done that and they've crossed several lines, including the Crimean Bridge, the pipelines, and now, of course, the threat of Zaporozhye. Now you're seeing less and less desire from Russia to say this will be negotiated. The belief is now this will end on the battlefield. That there is really little room for negotiation because they are not serious, meaning they want Russia to give up XYZ, things that Russia is not going to give up. So there is not a potential, in my opinion, for negotiation on a basis of meetings like this. There could be a lot of talk, a lot of back and forth, a lot of discussion. But at the end of the day, the belief right now is that the negotiations will happen on the battlefield after Russia wins this war. That is their belief, and that is what they've been doing. In Russia, people need to understand the government works in a way where they are separate and they stick to their own duties. So Lavrov is Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He's going to handle the foreign policy, the meetings with his counterparts and these officials talking about, potential economic relationships, cooperation with China, with the Arab world. He'll go to all those meetings. Then you have the Kremlin, that pretty much is Putin sticks in Russia and also handles some of the potential meetings, but he's mainly looking out for the entirety of Russia and the country itself. And then you have the Ministry of Defense, which is handling the conflict, and then of course you have the FSB, which is Russia's security service. And yeah, there is communication, but there's also differences of opinion. There's differences in how they handle things. And so out of all of those, the most diplomatic one is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And you have Lavrov, who will get feisty, but the most feisty one, of course, is Maria Zakharova, who really calls out the West every day on whatever they do and the hypocrisy. So I wouldn't put much stock in this is going to signify the Russians are just going to do what the Council of Foreign Relations want. I do agree that they want the Council of Foreign Relations. The whole point of Ukraine is to turn it into a part of the European Fourth Industrial Revolution world that they want to make Europe. But that won't happen in Russia. Russia wants nothing to do with that. They see this as an existential war, a war that if Russia does not win this, they will stop being Russia. The Russia will cease to exist. So that is the mindset they're going into this conflict with. And I don't think it necessarily started there, but I think that's where it's gone because of just the stakes have gotten higher and higher. And of course, in the same way, NATO thinks of this as an existential war. Ukraine must win, Russia must lose, because then they see things going down. But I do think that there is going to be an end to this. I don't think it's going to happen though via the negotiation table. Unless there's some sort of like weird like infiltration of people, and I believe that there could be in the Russian government. Absolutely, there is everywhere, right? So, but
to me, it seems like. I was just going to say, it just seems like that the administration is so fucking lost that the Council of Foreign Relations had to step in and like, all right, what can we do to get this shit done? We can't depend on these idiots anymore. What do we need to get done, Lavrov? Tell us what we need to get done. We want to exit this war somehow. And obviously, those driving the buses. I think I look at this as a big win for the Russian Federation and for Lavrov that the Council of Foreign Relations are coming to him going, hey, man. Yeah. We need to do something here. What can we do on this end? At least that's the way I see it. As them going to him, how do we end this? Because, like I said, how are they going to have all these other companies come in here, like Nestle and Monsanto and all these other countries that BlackRock is trying to bring into Kiev, unless they can get this war stopped somehow? And I think they bit off way more than they can chew, and they're trying to figure out a way out of it desperately. That's what I'm seeing. And
I have to give you the other side that was said here. when this came out was that NBC and whoever was spreading, because NBC I think talked about this, was spreading a fake information that there were no secret talks between Lavrov and the Council of Foreign Relations. The group of U.S. officials is how they described it. And they made it sound like they were negotiating peace talks. This is what happened when it happened. They said it was peace talks. It was just a conversation. And so the Russian foreign ministry said that it wasn't any sort of discussion at all whatsoever. And that Lavrov was just there for the UN Security Council meeting. And yeah, so they're kind of sort of denying that anything really happened between them. So it's hard to say. If Lavrov were to have a discussion with the Council of Foreign Relations, Putin would have approved it. There's no way that would have happened without Putin's approval. So it's kind of hard to say if it happened or not. But I will say that at the very least, they are saying that it didn't happen the way it was promoted as some sort of separate peace talk, and that they wouldn't entertain that without having a conversation. That, that like the CFR is not having a conversation with the Kremlin. Like that's not happening is what they're saying.
Let's get on to Syria, fam. I don't know what happened here, but maybe you can give us a little insight. What's going on with the BBC accreditation?
I don't know what happened. The BBC didn't publicly make up entire media packages and entire videos showing these fake chemical attacks that they tried to use to overthrow the Syrian president, right? That didn't happen. So Syria revoked the BBC's accreditation. And Syria did this for obvious reasons, like I just mentioned. They don't want the BBC to continue spreading all of this information on their in their country. One, the United States and NATO are stealing their oil. They have been doing it for a long time. They are supporting and backing these white helmet radicals, actual radicals, and Russia is there fighting with the Syrians, actual Syrians, against this. So of course they're not going to allow this. Now, I obviously have an opinion about this, and I separate this from any sort of free speech, saying that they're banning free speech, because this is not free speech. This is a public relations agency, the BBC. They are not a news outlet. They are just doing propaganda there, and they were responsible for a lot of this propaganda, and they went after people like Vanessa Beeley as well, specifically. So Syria's ministry said that the broadcaster, and this is what they're saying, failed to adhere to professional standards. In a recent BBC story linked the trade of an amphetamine called Pentagon with Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's family. The BBC said it provided impartial, independent journalism. And so Syria didn't agree. And the US, UK, and the European government blamed Syria and the Syrian government for the production and export of this drug use, and listed Assad's relatives as these key figures. And the Syrian government did not specifically reference the Pentagon report in its statement. It said that since Syria's civil war started in 2011, the BBC has occasionally provided subjective and fake information.
Occasionally.
Yeah, right. So that they're being nice. So yeah. So there you go. So they got their accreditation revoked, and if you look at everybody that's been talking about it, nobody's upset about this, right? So I said this, and I want to hear your take on this. I said, good, the BBC and CNN literally produce fake stories to push regime change. They're doing it again in Ukraine, and again, this is what they're doing in Ukraine, right? And I said, this isn't the free press, this is public relations now. So this is, and then on the second tweet, I kind of go on to explain, right, that these are the people that stood silent when people like Vanessa Beeley, who were exposing them went out and actually did journalism before anybody knew what was going on in Syria. She got it right from the start. And I wanted to explain this because I know some people are going to say this is you're supporting censorship, and that just, to me, you don't understand then if you think this is censorship, because this is how I feel about other countries: Venezuela, Russia, Cuba, any country, especially more of the smaller countries that are extremely vulnerable to U.S. hegemony. When they are reacting to something that the U.S. is doing, the U.S. and NATO and Israeli, British intelligence as well, they weaponize the media that they own to use it to overturn governments and overturn regimes. It is not on the same level as when the United States literally bans and censors everybody who is an independent or who has a different narrative, because they own the media. You can't say that they're on equal footing. So to me, this is definitely a completely different situation, and I think Syria has the right to protect itself, just like Cuba, just like Venezuela, just like any other country that is in a vulnerable position of being cooed by the United States, by these powers, and because they're the ones in power. They're the ones that own the media. They manipulate the narrative, and it's not the same to compare Syria, or especially Syria. I mean, it's a poor country. It's a country that's undergone a civil war. They're stealing their oil, and they're in a very vulnerable position. And so I'm not going to judge them and say, well, they can't, take away the BBC's accreditation because free speech. The BBC has been lying about them for over a decade now. So you know what? Like, they're going to do what they need to do. And we need to free our own media. We need to get our media back, because we don't have real media anymore. The real media is this: the CNN, MSNBC, all those people, including the progressives, which are like what is it, like imploding? That's been very fun to watch. They're imploding, right? They're not real. So really, I think that the fight is to fix our stuff first, right? As an American, it's to fix our media, to get our media back in control before we start criticizing what other countries do with their media.
Well, we have to also understand that they're not media, right? They're propaganda at this point. They're just there they're the stenographers, and they're all paid by big pharma, military-industrial complex, big tech. Fam, let's talk about independent media here in the States, right? Let's talk about something that an independent media show, the Convo Couch, who got put in the penalty box 3 years ago and demonetized, but recently, YouTube has mentioned that they're going to change their guidelines and allow people to talk about elections in a free and fair manner. So I went back to look at our monetization and our reinstatement when we reapplied, and they hadn't looked at it for over 6 months, when they usually said it takes a month. But the other day, they gave us an answer, fam. Let's take a look.
So YouTube finally answered my last my application back for monetization. They finally responded. It only took 6 months. It usually takes a month, but they finally responded. But look what they said this time. Your channel wasn't accepted for monetization because harmful content. Harmful content. What harmful content does the Convo Couch put up? Elections, COVID information. Still doing it. They don't give a damn.
So, fam, they're still doing the censorship over here, right? They're still like demonetizing people. They won't let them get back on. They don't give you specific information. We just reapplied. I mean, I still can't imagine. It's still hard to imagine the fact that we've been demonetized for almost 3 years now going on. That means we're not in the algorithm. We don't get any help. We don't get any recommended features. We're just pretty much just left out there to die. And, this is something that YouTube has done and has gotten away with. They killed any type of citizen journalist, any type of momentum that they've gotten. They've just destroyed them. They've kneecapped people and ruined their livelihoods. And they haven't allowed for an arena of free media to take place. But yet, those people who control all the strings, whatnot, they They want to be the propagandist, and they want to go out and say stuff. And when they get censored or demonetized or spanked or just put in their place, or just a light shined on what they're doing, they want to scream, oh, censorship and freedom of speech and all this other bullshit, when it's clearly not the same level playing field for them and independent media personalities.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I don't expect anything from YouTube. Like, that's the thing. Once they have you marked down, that's it. And anybody that's that's talked about these subjects when they weren't allowed to talk about them is somebody that's going to see things more thoroughly, and you're a problem for this establishment at that point, because it's a lot easier to see things 2-3 years after the fact. And I'm not trying to be rude to people. I'm just saying, like, there is a certain crowd that's going to be allowed, are people that were able to weasel through it because they weren't really on their radar. And so, unfortunately, when you are able to foresee things a lot more quickly, then they're just going to cut that before anything. Yeah. So that's essentially what's happened. And
we stuck our necks out when it wasn't popular. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
When it was hard, when it was like, you can't talk about that. That's when we were talking about things out of the gate. Very proud of that. Very, very happy with the work we did in COVID, and went back and watched a decent amount of these footages, some of the work we did, and we were out in front there. You know what I'm saying? We did a really good job as far as leftists in the United States that understood what was going on, that followed it in real time. But the fact that we were following it in real time put us on the radar. And same thing with elections. And we've been spanked and suppressed ever since. And I want to thank everybody here watching today, everybody who's on the Rockfins, the Rumbles, or the YouTubes. Thank you guys so much, because we have been, you can see, we're out of all the channels right now that are talking about a lot of things, right? We're the one channel more than anything that is still demonetized. Yeah, it's kind of messed up. We have not been given back our monetization. There's a bunch of us, Nico House hasn't. I don't think Graham Elwood has. I haven't talked to him. I don't know if Frank Analysis has, but we were all shot down and suspended and demonetized. And that really does mean a lot. When people go, oh, at least you still have your channel. But yeah, what does that mean? It's a channel that's demonetized. We can't make anything of it. We don't get promoted in any of the algorithms. We won't get lifted up. So it really is a tough situation. And I would have thought by now, especially with the new ruling coming out of Missouri and Louisiana, fam, where these attorney generals have gone and said, nope, what big tech did and what the government did was illegal. They're not allowed to do that. I would think that maybe we would have a different type of answer or whatnot, but no, we still get the same thing, because they're protected and they're never going to get in trouble for doing what they did, for ruining people's livelihoods, and for censoring the truth, right? For censoring the truth. That's what we're getting punished for, and it's really, really ridiculous that we're still at that same spot.
Yep, and I wouldn't expect anything more from YouTube, because that's who they are and who they're owned with. So, I mean, that's just it.
Censored tube, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, Rumble isn't much better, to be honest. You have to play the game of either being one or the other.
Team sports.
And that's a reality. So really, I mean, again, people create these independent outlets like Rumble and stuff, and then they end up doing the same type of structure. So you're really not changing anything, which is why the West really is really at a point where it is really collapsing, and there's just not enough, getting out there, not enough of this collective awareness. It's happening. It's just happening way too slow. And people, don't really know how to discern between the genuine nature of people and then people who are just, kind of capitalizing on everything. And there's a difference, and that's something that you can't really teach. It's just something either you're aware of it or you're not. So I think there needs to be an evolution in people's mind as to really before any of that changes, to be honest.
Fam, you want to read the Super Ray contribution from AREM in the Rockfins?
So, Common Couch Rocks, independent media is where it's at. Until it doesn't have to be said, it cannot be said enough. Support independent media. Thank you so much. Thank you, AREM.
AREM, you're a beautiful man. Thank you so much. guys, all the links down below to all our support links, they're there and whatnot. You can go help us out. I do have a Give, Send, Go that's going on right now. If you guys want to help out, you know what I want to do. I want to kind of get out there, and I want to go out and look at some of these campaigns. RFK is not the only campaign I tend to look at, even though it seems his campaign is growing and growing. Help me out. Help me get on the ground. I want to be out there. I want to go to Dr. Cornel West's campaign. I want to go to all these other campaigns, even though, Fiorella and some of my old friends, they'll tell you, and I can't even argue with them, that there has to be some type of movement outside of the electoral process. It's a shame that people only pay attention to when there is an electoral process going on. So I'm going to use this moment in time to talk about the issues, and I'm going to try to push people like RFK, push people like Cornel West, push them to help our movements out there, to get the information out there by asking them tough questions. That's all I can do, and that's all I will do if you guys give me the opportunity. So if you go to givesendgo.com/RFK media, you can help me out over there. I've got a decent amount going, and there's also the links to my PayPal, my Cash App, my Venmo, that kind of thing. That's what we got going on. I also do have another one too, fam, as well. This is really important, guys. You see it down below. GoFundMe.com. Fund this TCC independent work. It's right there. That's going to help out. Fiorella and I are going to be going to Nicaragua soon, fam. And the tickets alone to get from Russia over there, guys, are so expensive. So please help us out. That's what that money will go to as well over there. If you can reach out directly to Fiorella and you want to help her out, please help her out. You see what we're going through. We can't get any money from YouTube, and it really, really does hurt. Because they are one of the biggest platforms. If in fact we were getting like 1,000 people watching per show, and then once we got zonked, we've been in the penalty box ever since. It's been really hard. So please, and if you want to reach out any questions, you can always go to theconvocouch@gmail.com, and we can help you out. If there's any way we can answer any of your questions that we didn't get to during the show, please let us know. Fam, you got anything else going on? Are you on the news desk, or are you a couple days off? What's going on?
Been working so much, so no, I have one day off tomorrow, and then I work before I go to Nicaragua. So yeah, and the tickets are insane to get to Nicaragua. Insane, guys. Thousands of dollars just to get out of here because of the sanctions. It really, and multiple sanctions now. So yeah, it's a lot. I mean, I basically just put out anything I make to take these trips and do our work, basically. So that's what I do. But yeah, thank you guys so much for your support.
Yes, this is Rakero Rake. How do you say it? Is it Rakero?
Raker of Muxubis.
Raker of Muxubis. Raker of Muxubis is now a monthly member, monthly supporter over on the Rumble. So is Vicky Lynn. She's hanging out over there with a bunch of other cool people. Death to Tyrants. All my peeps. Manimus. Thank you so much, guys. You guys are amazing. Guys, anywhere you can help out the show, please do so. Every bit helps. It's independent media, and you keep it going. We got a lot of great stuff to report on, so please come check us out. So, fam, we'll have everybody watching for you over there on the Rumbles or the Odyssey, I guess. So we'll be doing that. You can help me out. I have like I said, I have this video I haven't put up yet too as well. I'll probably be talking about the differences with the medical freedom movement, what's going on over there in the United States, because it's very interesting right now, because the RFK campaign, fam, is trying to kind of keep its distance from it. They don't want to be just the guy. They don't want RFK to be the vaccine guy or just the COVID guy, but there's a lot of people who support him for those reasons, and they're kind of going, hey, man, we don't want you to forget about us over here. We want to talk about gain of function, and we want to make sure it is banned, because if they just ban it, then this shit would have never happened in the first place. And a lot of people are open right now to understanding and learning what went on, just so it doesn't happen again. So that's going to be very interesting. And thank you so much, Gamer for Life, for the great things. Fam, that's it for today?
Yes, that's it.
All right, so that's it. We'll be getting out of here. You know where you can watch, fam. We'll see you back on Wednesday. We love you. Thank you guys for helping us out. For Pasta Jardula,
Fiorella,
and me, fam, on those ones and twos.
All right, come out.
All right. I love the way you say that.